The restaurant's door swings open, and in walks a man dressed in a sharp, expensive suit. He moves with an air of confidence, almost as if he owns the place. His shoes shine with polish, and the way he carries himself suggests he's used to people noticing him. The hostess greets him with a smile, but he barely acknowledges her, brushing past as if she's just another part of the background. His car, parked outside, is a sleek, high-end model. The kind you only see in luxury car ads. He's the kind of man who enjoys flaunting his wealth, from the flashy watch on his wrist to the designer tie that costs more than most people's monthly rent. When he takes a seat at a table, the other diners glance over, not out of admiration, but because of the self-assured aura that surrounds him. He doesn't mind, he's used to it. He orders with a wave of his hand, and his tone suggests he doesn't think anyone in the restaurant could be his equal. As the waiter approaches, the man doesn't bother to make eye contact. He's too busy checking his phone, ignoring the polite "good evening" and the menu suggestions. He's already decided what he wants, something extravagant, something to match his attitude. The restaurant has seen him before, but that doesn't make his presence any less noticeable. He's a regular, and with each visit, he acts as if the place should be grateful for his custom. From the way he speaks, it's clear, this man sees himself as someone above everyone around him. Tips, kindness, and small gestures of gratitude, none of them matter to him. What matters is that he's here, and that should be enough for anyone. The waitress approaches the table, a warm smile on her face. Her uniform is neat, and she moves with the grace of someone who's worked in this busy restaurant for a while. She's young, probably in her 20s, but there's a maturity in the way she handles herself. Her eyes are kind, and her movements are practiced. She's used to balancing multiple tasks at once, all while keeping a cheerful demeanor. She greets the man politely, but he barely looks up from his phone. It's a routine she's grown accustomed to, especially with customers like him, the ones who feel entitled and don't have the patience to acknowledge those around them. But that doesn't faze her. She's here to do a job, and she'll do it well. As she takes his order, she notices his tone, dismissive, almost impatient. It's clear he's not here for a conversation. She's just the person delivering his food, nothing more. She nods, writing down his selection, not missing a beat. In her mind, this is just another day at work, another rich customer, another indifferent attitude. It's nothing new. Despite his coldness, she remains professional, offering a few suggestions and taking his order in stride. She's heard his type before. The ones who think they can order whatever they want, without any regard for the people serving them. But she doesn't let it affect her. She's here to make sure everyone gets their meal, regardless of their attitude. When she leaves the table, she feels a twinge of something. Maybe it's disappointment, maybe it's just another reminder of the imbalance between the customers and the staff. But she doesn't dwell on it. There's work to do. She moves on to the next task, her mind already on the next table, the next customer. And just like that, the man is forgotten. For now. The waitress returns to the man's table with his meal. She places the plate in front of him with a smile, trying to make the experience a little more pleasant. He barely acknowledges her, a brief glance at her before he returns his attention to his phone. She stands for a moment, waiting for some sort of response, but he doesn't say anything. She's used to it by now. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" she asks. Her voice polite, though she knows the answer. He doesn't look up. "No," he mutters, waving her off as if her presence is an inconvenience. She nods and turns to leave, but then he calls out, "Actually, bring me the check when you get a chance." She doesn't mind, it's part of the job. She's seen it 100 times, customers who want to pay and leave quickly, probably because they think their time is more valuable than anyone else's. It's a bit of a slap in the face, but she's learned not to take it personally. The man continues to scroll through his phone, his eyes never leaving the screen. The room hums with the noise of other diners, but in his bubble, everything is quiet, his world reduced to just himself. He takes no notice of the other staff members rushing around, nor does he show any appreciation for the work they do. To him, the restaurant is just another place to eat, not a place where people work hard to make sure everything goes smoothly. When the waitress returns with the check, she places it carefully in front of him, still smiling. She's been trained to be polite, and it's a habit she's mastered well. He doesn't even look at her this time. He grabs the check, scans the total quickly, and tosses it aside with one hand. His focus is still on his phone. "I'll take care of it," he says, almost absent-mindedly. She stands there for a moment, not sure if she should say anything, but then she just nods and walks away. Her shift is almost over, and she knows there's no use in expecting anything more from him. The man finishes his meal, a few crumbs left on the plate. He swipes the napkin across his mouth and casually tosses it onto the table. His phone still in his hand, he stands up, making no effort to signal to the waitress or anyone else that he's ready to pay. The restaurant is busy, but he's in his own world, a world where everyone is just background noise. The waitress, who's been keeping an eye on him from across the room, sees him standing. She walks over, ready to finalize the transaction. "Can I take care of the check for you?" she asks, walking up with the machine in hand. Her voice is steady, her movements smooth, but underneath, she's already bracing herself. She knows people like him. They don't always tip well, if at all. It's not something that surprises her anymore, just a regular part of the job. He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he pulls out his wallet, flipping it open with a smooth motion. His fingers brush across a few cards, and then he pulls one out, handing it to her without looking up. He's still preoccupied with his phone, probably reading some email or text message, as if paying for his meal is the least of his concerns. The waitress takes the card and slides it into the machine. She waits for the approval. It's something she's done countless times. But this time there's a pause. A longer pause than usual. The machine makes a quiet beep and then it flashes, "Declined." She doesn't let her surprise show. She's seen this happen before, but it still feels a little uncomfortable every time. She glances at him, expecting him to brush it off, to say something like, "Try it again," but instead, he looks at the machine with a furrowed brow. "That's strange," she says, trying to sound neutral. "Let me try again." She slides the card again, this time more slowly, hoping for a different result. The machine beeps again and the words "declined" appear on the screen. The man glances up at her now, annoyance creeping into his expression. "There must be some mistake," he says, but his voice sounds a little less certain this time. He reaches for his card, swiping it once more, but the same result flashes on the screen. "Declined." He takes a deep breath, his confidence starting to crack. He glances around, suddenly looking like he's in a rush. "Just try it one more time," he says, his voice less casual now, almost demanding. She nods. "Of course, sir." She slides the card once more, hoping for a different outcome, but the machine beeps again. A final, unwavering, "declined." The man looks at the machine, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't right," he mutters, more to himself than to her. He starts rummaging through his wallet as though the card is somehow in the wrong spot. He pulls out another card and hands it over, his fingers tight as if it's his last resort. The waitress takes the second card and slides it into the machine. This time, her heart beats a little faster, but she doesn't let it show. She's worked here long enough to know that things like this happen, but as she watches the machine flash "declined" again, she feels the weight of the moment. She glances up at him again. He's beginning to look more and more uncomfortable. "Sir, I'm afraid your card has been declined 3 times, she says gently. There's no judgment in her tone, just professionalism. "Would you like to try another method of payment?" The man's face flushes with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. This wasn't supposed to happen. He's never had this problem before. In his world, credit cards are always accepted, no matter how much they're swiped. But this time something is different. And he doesn't like it. The man's calm confidence has slowly started to fade, replaced by a visible tension in his posture. His fingers twitch around the edges of his wallet, then his phone, and back to the wallet again. His gaze darts between the waitress and the machine, disbelief flashing in his eyes. He's trying to remain composed, but it's becoming harder with each failed attempt. He pulls out yet another card, swiping it desperately. His impatience is growing with every second. The waitress stands there quietly, not rushing him, not showing any sign of impatience, but there's a sense of control now that wasn't there before. She's still professional, still polite, but she can see the shift in him. The arrogance he came in with is beginning to slip away, and what's left is a man who's trying to keep up the appearance of being in control. The machine beeps once again. Declined. The man's face tightens, his jaw clenching. He mutters something under his breath, but the words are too soft to make out. His eyes flicker toward the exit, as if considering walking out, but then he looks back at the waitress, who remains calm and unmoving. It's not an option now. The power has shifted. The other customers in the restaurant have started to notice the situation unfolding. Some glance over discreetly, but no one speaks up. The man doesn't seem to care that they're watching, but there's a growing discomfort in his eyes. He taps his fingers against the table, frustration building. His usual air of superiority is slipping away, replaced by an increasing sense of panic. His voice is shaky now when he speaks. "This is impossible. My card should work," he says, almost pleading. His demeanor is no longer that of a confident, rich man used to getting his way. He's a man in trouble, and it's becoming obvious. The waitress stands firm, her presence unshaken. She doesn't say anything, but there's an understanding between them. She knows the situation isn't going to end the way he imagined. The man's voice rises slightly, trying to regain control. "This is ridiculous," he says, his tone laced with frustration. He leans over the table, his eyes scanning the surrounding room, as if expecting someone to help. But no one does. The waitress remains calm, keeping her distance but also not backing down. She's seen this before, not with everyone, but with people like him, who have the sense that they should never be questioned. She doesn't react to his outburst. Instead, she speaks softly but firmly. "I'm afraid I'll need another form of payment, sir." Her eyes don't leave his for a moment, not in anger, not in fear, just in that professional way she's been trained. The kind of gaze that says, "This is business." He's starting to sweat now, and the facade of confidence he entered with is long gone. The man pulls out his phone, his fingers shaking slightly as he swipes through it, no longer caring about how he appears to others. "There must be something wrong with the system," he mutters, his voice low, almost pleading. He makes another call, probably trying to reach someone who can help, but there's no response. His face grows more strained, his frustration visible. The waitress watches him, but she doesn't rush him. She's in no hurry. In her mind, she's seen far worse than this. Men in his position, with their wallets full, too proud to admit when they've made a mistake, too proud to even consider asking for help. "Can I help you with something, sir?" she asks again, her voice still polite, still composed. She's not offering a solution, not in the way he might want. She's offering him dignity. An opportunity to fix things, to admit he needs help. The man glances at her, his eyes narrowing. "I don't need your help," he snaps, but his words don't hold the same weight they once did. There's no confidence behind them anymore, just a deepening sense of helplessness. The waitress doesn't respond, she simply stands there, waiting for him to realize what she already knows. He can't leave until the bill is settled, and despite his growing frustration, she's not backing down. She knows that, in this moment, she holds all the power. The man grows quieter, his shoulders slumping, and for the first time since he walked in, he looks vulnerable. There's no arrogance left, no sense of entitlement. His eyes are no longer darting around the room to avoid the reality of the situation. He's trapped in a position where he has no choice but to face it head-on. The table between them feels larger now, separating the man from the security he once had in his wealth, from the confidence he had at the start. He pulls his wallet out again, trying to find something, anything, that might work. But nothing does. His hands tremble as he shuffles through the cards, each attempt more desperate than the last. He looks up at her again, this time not with defiance, but with an expression that almost resembles shame. The waitress doesn't say anything. She stands still, letting him wrestle with the situation, giving him the space he needs to figure it out. She's not judging him. She's simply waiting for him to take responsibility for what's happening. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, he stops. He puts his wallet down with a deep sigh, glancing back up at the waitress. It's clear he's run out of options. She remains silent, her posture still straight, her face a mask of professionalism. She hasn't budged an inch, and for the first time, he's the one who's looking for a solution. The man lets out a long, frustrated sigh, His face is flushed now, his hands shaking as he places the wallet back down on the table. For a moment, he just stares at it, as if willing the problem to disappear, but it doesn't. The tension in the air is thick, and he's no longer the confident man who walked in just an hour ago. Now, he's just another customer, stuck in a situation he can't control. He pulls out his phone once more, his fingers trembling as he dials another number. This time, his voice cracks slightly as he leaves a message, asking someone, anyone, to come help him settle the bill. It's embarrassing, he mutters under his breath, more to himself than to her. His eyes never leave the phone screen, and his earlier arrogance is gone, replaced by something more vulnerable. The waitress stands quietly by the table, her expression calm but patient. She doesn't rush him, doesn't push him. She knows the situation is uncomfortable enough without adding pressure. She's simply waiting for him to resolve it in his own way. A few minutes later, the man's phone rings. His shoulders visibly relax as he speaks quickly, trying to explain the situation. He glances up at the waitress, a look of resignation in his eyes. "I'll send someone to take care of it," he says, his voice softer now. She nods once, still composed. "Thank you, sir." The man gathers his things, his posture hunched, as if the weight of the situation is finally catching up to him. He walks toward the door, his movements slower than before. As he leaves, the waitress watches, but she doesn't make a comment. The situation is resolved, and that's all that matters. She turns back to her work, her calm demeanor unaffected. She's done her job, nothing more, nothing less.